I want to bring in NBC's Aaron Gilchrist in College Park, Maryland, where the vice president spoke earlier today. Ruth Igielnik, New York Times staff editor for News Surveys. Simone Sanders Townsend is former chief spokesperson for Vice President Harris and co-host of The Weekend here on MSNBC. And with me here in studio, Republican strategist and MSNBC political analyst Susan Del Percio. Great to have all of you. Aaron, this may well, debate night, be the first time a lot of voters are really tuning into this race. So how is the Biden campaign trying to take advantage of that huge audience?
Yeah, I think the campaign is very aware of that reality, Chris. And so what we're seeing over the course of this week is the campaign trying to put this particular issue of reproductive freedom, as they've called it, in front of voters, potential voters, early and often, if you will. Vice President Harris has really led the charge on this issue for several months now on her reproductive freedom tour. And today we saw her talk about that issue through the prosecution, if you will, of former President Trump. The campaign has said all along that they believe the overturning of Roe v. Wade was the result of Donald Trump's actions. The vice president, in her remarks today, really at the core of her remarks today, said that the actions that Donald Trump took to put 3 Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court, effectively setting up the methodology for the overturning of Roe, was premeditated. She said that states that have subsequently banned abortion were his accomplices, and that him taking credit for what the Supreme Court ultimately did with Dobbs was a confession of sorts. And so in the end of her remarks, she said that Donald Trump was guilty of stealing reproductive freedom from women around this country. I want you to hear a little bit more of what the vice president told this really a raucous crowd here of supporters today. Listen.
Donald Trump thinks the government is in a better position to tell women what's in their best interest than women are to know for themselves. But Joe Biden and I trust women. And women trust all of us to fight for their most fundamental freedoms.
And so the vice president now is headed out west, where she will participate in a panel discussion of sorts around this same issue. This is something that we saw the First Lady talk about over the weekend. There are other events happening all over the country today with local surrogates who are addressing this issue as well. And as we said, it's something that the campaign believes people are getting energized around and will lead to potentially good results for them come the November election, Chris.
Aaron, thanks for that. Look, Simone, clearly the administration, the Biden campaign are not letting up on this day after day after day. They're hammering it home. If you're not listening on Sunday, they're going to talk about it on Monday. Here's Vice President Kamala Harris on MSNBC talking about abortion. Just a little bit of what she said to us.
This is not just a matter that is for debate and discussion and intellectual conversation. The real harm that has occurred every day in America since that case was decided and these laws are being passed, to your point, we know the stories about women seeking care because they're going through a miscarriage and being turned away by an emergency room because the physicians there are afraid they're going to be put in jail. In a state like Texas, they provide prison for life for a healthcare provider doing their job. And I don't think that I think that when you look at this issue, most people agree you don't have to abandon your faith. You don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government should not be telling women what to do with their bodies.
There's a lot to unpack there, a lot of different messages, I think, Simone. So help us unpack it and give us your take on how the campaign is trying to maximize their edge on this issue.
Well, first, Chris, I cannot remember the last time a sitting president or vice president went into a studio to do an interview. Usually the folks come to them. And so the fact that the vice president wasn't, this interview didn't happen with Mika in the ceremonial office at the White House, in the vice president's office, or at her home at the Naval Observatory, that it was in studio and sitting next to a young woman named Hadley, who folks might remember from Kentucky, was featured very heavily in Governor Beshear's reelection ads because she was raped as a young woman, was by her stepfather, and talked about her story. Because in Kentucky, there were bills on the table and politicians that wanted to make it impossible for young women like Hadley to get an abortion. So I think what the campaign here is trying to do is to put a face to an issue that is very emotionally charged, but also politically charged across the country for folks. And when you put a face to the issue, when you talk about the fact that, you know, women are being denied care for a miscarriage, right? When you talk about the fact that under a number of these laws across the country, women are unable to get the care they need if they have an ectopic pregnancy, right? Which is a non-viable pregnancy where the egg is not where it's supposed to be, and the same drug that they would give to administer for a medical abortion is the same drug, mifepristone, that is used to take care of an ectopic pregnancy. When you talk about that, women who are literally being made to bleed out in parking lots, women like Kate Cox, who introduced the vice president today, a story we now know very well from Texas, who was denied the care that she needed for a baby that she wanted, but a baby, again, was non-viable. The pregnancy was non-viable, so she needed an abortion. That face changes the conversation for folks. And I do think that the campaign has been quite successful in as we used to say when I worked for the vice president, prosecuting that case, right? Setting it up as though, like, look, we can talk about these existential issues, but look at the women we are talking about across the country.
And as you point out, she's sitting next to one of those women who at 14 was raped by her stepfather. Ruth, you wrote a great article, and it basically explains that while Biden's path to victory will rely on women, his lead among women is the smallest of any Democrat in 20 years. And since 2020, Biden has lost 10 points among white women and trails by 8. While he holds significant leads among Black and Hispanic women, he's also lost, 30 points among both groups. So what's the takeaway from this? Because for all the talk about abortion galvanizing women, the numbers suggest he could be in trouble.
Yeah, that's right. He has lost significant ground with women. And to be clear, Joe Biden is still winning among women, but by far less than he was in 2020 and other Democrats have in the last 20 years. And KFF did a survey to dig into this, and they talked to 3,000 women. And what they found was abortion is a motivating factor for about 10% of women, but for the vast majority of women, including 60% of Black women and Hispanic women, it really is about the economy, and that is their motivating factor. They asked if they're better off financially under Biden or Trump, and that group was much better off financially under Trump.
Yeah, Susan, that's the trick, right? Communications is your thing, and it may not be a clear-cut win for Trump with women, but the economy being so important, I want to play some sound from Donald Trump, who's not ceding the abortion issue, by the way, and what he had to say at the Faith and Freedom Coalition. Take a listen.
Yeah, so, some of us in our group, are torn on Trump, which is why half our group is here and half is not. Because of his comments regarding abortion, we want a federal abortion ban, and obviously he wouldn't support something like that.
I do also believe in a federal ban. I don't really believe in any exemptions. I will say that when there are situations where pregnancy needs to be ended for medical emergency, that is something that shouldn't be blocked, but there is always a solution other than abortion.
So help us understand that and how both candidates try to appeal to those voters who seem somewhat conflicted.
Well, I think with Trump, his problem is he keeps kind of flip-flopping around it. He believes that if he's just talking to one audience, he can take credit and seem, I got Roe v. Wade overturned. No one said it could be done, and I did it. But yet he's also kind of careful saying, oh, it's now a state's issue, which everyone wanted, which everyone did not want. And the more Donald Trump talks about this issue, I think the bigger hole he digs for himself. But at the end, looking at it from a practitioner's point of view, like with the polling and such, yes, you see abortion low down on the top issues when you ask that question, most pressing issue facing you as a voter. But when you start making it a one or the other, abortion or the economy, you start seeing there is a way to parse that question, especially on the extremist positions where we're now seeing pop up in states of no exception for rape or incest or life of the mother. So I think that's what both sides will end up trying to do, at least down ballot. And I think that President Biden is right to talk about abortion, but also freedom. And that's where I think he's going to make it, as well as on health care, because now we don't have OBGYNs flocking to a lot of states because they're afraid of going to jail.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn. MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.